7. He kicked off his walking boots and pulled out his soft black plimsolls from the poacher's pocket of his wind cheater. He slipped them on and skirted the fence until he was level with the far corner of the house, which faced out onto the fields. He picked out a sturdy-looking drain pipe leading up to the roof. Without hesitation, he descended the few feet of sloping lawn, and several short, light steps crossed the gravel with 3 delicate munches, and placed his right toe on the drain pipe's second bracket. Up went his other foot to the third. Keeping his elbows in, away from the windows on either side, he climbed the drain pipe, his strong, slow movements spiderish in the gloom. Then he reached the top and flipped over onto the roof. Almost soundlessly, he found 2 skylights, the nearest one looking in on what appeared to be a converted loft, the furthest one to his left over a corridor. It was through this skylight scuffed glass that he glimpsed a shaft of light, oddly angled light emanating from one of the rooms. Hallam saw 2 shadows dart into view, unusually long from what seemed to be the same figure, 2 spotlights, then cast at different angles. They had to be in there. But from where Hallam was, he could neither see nor hear anything properly. The walls and roof were too solid by far, and the skylight was firmly secured. He looked desperately around him and saw a tall chimney stack not far from where the room must be. He eased the grate off the top of the first pot and put his ear to it. Silence at first, or something near to it, just a regular ticking sound that might as easily have been an insect. Then what sounded like a sigh and a moan. Sex, he thought, with righteous indignation. The dirty sleaze bag. Then the first whisper of a voice, Alasdair's it had to be, hot with admiration. "Yeah, lovely, that's it. Is this okay?" "Oh yeah, higher, good. Good!" A barrage of clicks. Hallam was disappointed. "Just a photo shoot?" "Hold it, can you keep it there?" "Yeah, right against it." "Effing yes." Clickety-click, click. Hallam's ears pricked up. What kind of photo shoot exactly? The sort that he didn't want his girlfriend to know about, or his Perthshire neighbors for that matter? Hallam felt a ripple of shallow amusement. Nothing an anonymous community mail shot couldn't fix. If only he could see what was going on. Inner rooms were the curse of his calling. At this point, Hallam heard the sound of drum and bass echo up through the chimney. The stereo put paid to any further eavesdropping, but at least he need not worry so much about being heard himself. The window facing out into the corridor might allow him a glimpse into the room through the open door, even perhaps an entry. The thought made his heart beat faster, and he registered a familiar burst of excitement in his belly. He pulled out the thin coil of mountaineer's rope from the haversack, strapped on his belt, and tested the metal clips. Then he attached one end to the nearest secure chimney stack at the edge of the roof and threw a leg over the side of the low wall in preparation for lowering himself down. He was ready to go, but in this strange rural environment he was nervous. He glanced over at the rope and wondered whether there might be some risk the lasso could ride up onto the pot. He decided to play it safe. He stepped along the wall to tug it down, his head level with the pot. Something exploded out of the chimney into his face. There was a sharp blow to his cheek and a clatter of gray wings. With instinctive disgust, he lifted his hands to cover his eyes, but the movement unbalanced him. One foot slipped off the edge of the roof, and he toppled over into the darkness, arms flapping vainly in an attempt to stay upright. The drop was short, and the safety harness did its job, but he was unlucky. As the rope caught, he was twisted violently, and his head smacked against a stone wall. He bounced left, then right, the impact resounding on shoulder, then knee. He hung there, back arched, arms limp, for several seconds. His vision was blurred, the tears making crystal visions out of the waving starlit sky. The blood thumped in his temples, accompanying the music drumming against the window to his left. He was rotating, gently left then right, nauseously. He lifted an arm. His hand seemed a long way away and gripped the taut rope. Then the other arm responded. He pulled himself round with huge effort, and brought himself back into position, his feet against the wall, legs bent. But still he couldn't see straight. He thought about climbing back up again, but he felt too groggy and weak. He looked at the window, emitting faint light. Perhaps if he got his foot on the ledge he could lift himself. A stabbing pain seemed to skewer his left eye. Concentrate, Hallam thought. He flexed his knees and prepared to hop over to the left. He did hop, but the swing of the rope took him further than he anticipated. His left foot went straight through the near window pane with a loud smash up to the knee. As he drunkenly struggled to retrieve it without slitting his knee on the shards of glass, the music stopped and two figures casting four shadows filled up the rectangle of light on the corridor carpet. I'm done for, thought Hallam, and grinned hopelessly. He began to laugh at the two figures who were staring in disbelief at his leg, which had plunged into their private world. His head dropped back. He was unconcerned now. Nothing very much seemed to matter any more. The wind ruffled his hair and the rope creaked. "Gotta hate pigeons," he muttered, or perhaps only thought before closing his eyes. Hallam lay on the sofa, a pillow under his head and a cold flannel on his brow. The model, her name was Carrie, turned out to have medical training. She had been designed first aid expert in the office where she worked part-time. She said by way of reassurance, and her confusion over the circumstances of Hallam's injury caused her to fuss unnecessarily over the practical tasks. She leaned over him with a frown of concern. Her vision still seemed a bit fuzzy, but he noticed that she was wearing one of Alasdair's jumpers. "How does that feel, okay?" Her voice sounded weird, unnaturally loud but distant, distorted like an amplified echo, but Hallam smiled weakly. "Yes, thank you, much better. Feel sick at all?" "Not really, I just need to get my bearings." She glanced over behind Hallam and stood straight. "If you do feel sick, there's a bucket by the side here. I'll just cool that down for you," she said, lifting the flannel to his forehead. Off his forehead. "I don't think he's concussed," she whispered to Alasdair and walked out. She was replaced in Hallam's field of vision by the man himself. He was wearing a loose-fitting white shirt and jeans. He didn't look very friendly. "So what the F were you doing on my roof?" Hallam closed his eyes and opened them again. "Just looking in." Alasdair didn't smile. "I want an explanation, Hallam. Either that or I call the police, although I might anyway." "Why? Why shouldn't I? Breaking an entry. Well, partial entry, anyway." "She's nice," said Hallam. Alasdair scowled. "Is this about Kate? Are you a private eye or something?" Hallam looked at Alasdair with dwindling curiosity and smiled. Nothing seemed complicated anymore. "Did she put you up to this?" The man was obviously a moron. Hallam observed that Alasdair, maybe in response to his beatific expression, now seemed slightly ashamed of his paranoid last comment. Hallam turned his face into the pillow. "No, of course she didn't," Alasdair answered himself, assessing Hallam with mild disgust. He leaned in. "This is off your own back, isn't it? A little freelance pervert, aren't you?" Hallam kept his eyes closed, but muttered into the pillow's duck feathers. "Just your market, I would have thought." A silence said, a tight, restrained voice. "You've got this very wrong, Hallam. This isn't anything smutty. It's a proper assignment. Proper calendars. I've got the stuff published, you know. Reputable men's magazines, mate, not Fiesta or Reader's Wives. Not the sort of stuff you probably jack off to." Hallam looked at Alasdair, suddenly interested. "Alasdair, the pictures you take, do you get her to look into the camera?" "What?" As if it was a trick question. "When you're doing your assignments, do you feel the models are looking at you when they look into the camera? Doing it for you?" Alasdair's mind went blank for a moment. He struggled to think. "Well, I suppose not for me exactly, no. I'm not looking at them either. I'm looking for the image. It's like we're both serving the image." "Aye, that's it." Hallam smiled and nodded. His suspicions were confirmed. Alasdair was indeed an a-hole. All of Hallam's actions, past and future, had now been justified. "I've confiscated your film, by the way. What's the idea? Collecting evidence? Trying to turn her against me? Want her for yourself? Is that it?" Alasdair looked at Hallam's face and got his own confirmation. "This camera, the binoculars, all that gear. You've done this sort of thing before, haven't you? You're a stalker." "Man, I thought your mob were jailbirds and schemies, not English public school boys working out of an office. Do you really think she'll love you for this?" Hallam levered himself up to his elbows. "You won't tell her about this." Alasdair began to smile, but it only got halfway, the look on Hallam's face too worrying to enjoy properly. "Why shouldn't I? If you're going to slander me to her, make out that I'm some kind of pornographer." "Maybe I won't, if you won't." Alasdair assessed him. "Why the H would I strike a bargain with you when I've just dragged you in through my own window, with your probably just back in your pants?" "Al?" It was Carrie. Alasdair looked up and seemed embarrassed. "Oh, hi, Carrie. I'm off now. We'll talk later, okay?" "Wait, you don't need to." Alasdair stopped himself. "Okay, we'll speak soon." She went. Alasdair considered Hallam again, who now sat up and dizzily felt the back of his head where a large bump had formed. He tried to stand up and had to steady himself on the arm of the sofa. "Where's your car?" Hallam paused to think. He couldn't remember. "Okay, come with me," said Alasdair with resignation. Clearly, Hallam looked pathetic. "You'll stay here tonight. You're in no state to drive." Alasdair took him to the green room where he had seen Carrie undress earlier that evening. Alasdair pulled back the sheets on the bed and pointed out the bathroom next door. He looked critically at Hallam as he tottered to the bed and sat down. "I'm not taking you to the hospital." "That's quite all right. Buzz the intercom if you need anything. I mean an emergency, thanks." Hallam sat on the bed and looked up at Alasdair, who was uncertain despite himself. He seemed to be trying to judge with the extent of his visitor's derangement. "Right then, we'll talk tomorrow." Alasdair went out and paused for a moment before shutting the door behind him. Hallam strained his ears for the sound of a key turning in the lock, but it did not come, and after a second he heard Alasdair's footsteps pad back down the corridor. Either Alasdair was too proud to admit feeling threatened by a sad creep like him, or he grasped the passive psychology of a voyeur better than Hallam expected. Hallam fell back on the bed and pressed his cheek against the cool linen. He leant over and turned off the lamp, then lay back and winced as his brutes sank back into the pillow. It was 4:06 a.m. when Hallam's door brushed softly against the carpet. The solidity of the building seemed to enhance the profound quiet of the night, and Hallam did little to disturb it as he floated down the corridor, not needing to feel his way thanks to observations of the building's layout from the roof from his brief but a sharp assessment of the positions of the windows and doors on his way to the bedroom. Such note-taking was almost second nature to him now, even with the splitting headache. He tried the second door on his left, the photographic studio, but found it locked, so he continued on to the main stairwell, around which were two more bedrooms, he presumed, and below them the main hall. He paused there and listened and smelled the air, trying to disregard the suggestion of distant conversation or movement that hovered at the edge of every dead silence. It was a creation of the mind, abhorring aural vacuums. Hallam's instinct told him that the bedrooms on this floor would not be occupied by the main resident. Where would he stay if he was living here? He was drawn to the left. The door he saw was unusually proportioned, smaller than the other two, with a different handle, most likely a later addition. Hallam carefully opened it, and saw a narrow, steep set of wooden steps. Towards the loft, of course. Hallam already sensed that Alasdair was up there, perhaps a whiff of stale, sleepy air that carried a tang of sweat. So Alasdair, too, was drawn to the caves of the house. Hallam smiled, a man after his own heart. A sense of empathy filled him with a quiet confidence. Once he had that feeling that he was beginning to understand a subject, to get a feel for them, he knew they were much less likely to detect his presence. It was as if he knew how not to disturb their patterns, and even when they did lurch out of sleep, having heard or sensed him move through the house, it had the power to lull them back into unconsciousness. Up the stairs he went, remembering what he had glimpsed through the skylight, already filling in the likely position of the furniture. All his senses alert to the signs that would surely present themselves from underneath the veil of pitch darkness. He turned right at the top of the stairs, the wall behind him. To his right was the bed. He could hear the quiet breathing. Ahead, a window, beside it a desk or table and a chair. He went towards the chair first to sit and enjoy this musty aura of privacy, to gauge its atmosphere. His fingers found the back of the chair as he sat. It made a light creaking noise. He heard a rustle from the bed, a shift. Hallam overpowered that noise with his confidence. He leaned back and relaxed, allowing it to creak a little more as it received its weight. He sat that way for several minutes, until he knew that Alasdair was down again, out for the count. He reached out a hand and touched what felt like a mirror. In front of it, comb, further along a can of deodorant perhaps, then a book and a pack of cigarettes with a lighter on top of it. He lifted the mirror and brought it up to his own face. It was so dark that he could barely detect it there. He opened his eyes wide, but there was no reflection, nothing. He looked over towards the bed. How could Alasdair, or anyone else for that matter, know how this felt? Alasdair rolled again and snored. Even asleep he was comfortable and confident in a way that Hallam could never hope to achieve, so self-assured that he could abuse Kate's love and break the trust she had invested in him. In this darkness, though, Hallam knew that his moral indignation was simply a way of handling what he hated in Alasdair, and envied, those traditional male virtues that women still in their hearts seemed to worship: strength, self-assurance, callousness, in short, all the equivocal attractions that came with sexual experience. Only in circumstances like this could Hallam feel in a position of relative strength. He wanted to teach Alasdair something about the private life of a voyeur. How strange it was, with its proximity to intimacy that would only explode if you reached out to touch it, the addictive solace it provided in moments of acute loneliness, but which ultimately only made the yearning worse, the world of unfulfillment. He took the mirror and reached out for the lighter. Then he stood up. He would show Alasdair what it felt like to be frightened by what you have become and what you yet might be. What it was like to find yourself in the dark, as a stranger, unbearably close. He went to the side of the bed. Alasdair was lying on his back, mouth open, snoring softly. Hallam smiled with what might have passed for pity and knelt down beside him. He raised the mirror to Alasdair's face until it was close enough for his breath to cloud the mirror's surface. and then he placed the lighter below it. A flame jumped up in the dark, and another, its reflection in the mirror equally bright. The yellow light played on Alasdair's closed eyelids, which seemed to flutter. He murmured but did not move. He was far away but floating towards consciousness, rising up to meet the flame that hissed in front of him. "Alasdair," whispered Hallam in his ear. Minutely, Alasdair's eyelashes lifted. They did not open fully, and all they could have seen was his own dimly lit face, mouth slack, and jaw hanging in his sleep, corpse-like. The flame continued to hiss. Alasdair did not shift, but a sonorous groan emerged from far back in his throat. Hallam stayed that way for a few more seconds until his thumb began to burn from the key to the lighter's flame, and he took the mirror away, letting the nightmare that he had hopefully initiated follow its own path into Alasdair's dreams. The door shut softly behind him. 8. Hallam entered the work in precariously high spirits. The elation he felt at having something to pin on Alasdair was tempered by trepidation, partly, of course, because Alasdair now possessed at least as much damaging information as he did. But there was also a vaguer and more superstitious worry. It concerned the approach of the 11th of August, a date which had significance pasted all over it, but which, like most portents, remained unhelpfully enigmatic. Kate was, as usual, already at her desk. Hallam smiled on his way past and spoke his customary good morning, trying to disguise his sudden fear that Alasdair may have already told her about their abseiling encounter. Kate's face did not betray any obvious marks of shock or disgust, however. She grunted a reply, not looking up from her screen. She seemed withdrawn, a trifle glum, though no more than most office workers on a Monday morning. He was halfway to his desk when she touchily called out his name. "Yes, mistress," he answered in a failed attempt at jocularity. Her face did not shift. "Have you written the new legacy document yet?" "Yeah, I've got a draft done. Just a bit of polishing to do, and I'll email it across. Hurry it up, would you? The printers have already been on the phone this morning." "Sure. It's just you didn't mention a deadline last time. It's midday, okay? Do you think you can manage it?" "Certainly, Kate." Hallam sat at his desk and logged on. Would she be acting stroppily like this if Alasdair had mentioned anything? He had already thought up a title for the leaflet, "A Legacy for Life," with a strapline which ran at the moment, "Help us continue Cancer Action's life-saving research by making a will." This, he envisaged, would be accompanied by a granny charming picture of a well-preserved old lady with her arms held protectively round two children. The children would be smiling adoringly up at her. The leaflet was to replace the drab form which had been knocked up years ago, and was judged to put off potential donors with its legal phraseology and bureaucratic cover. The aim of this new document was to bring the reader smoothly round to the idea of depriving their relatives of an inheritance and leaving it all to the far more deserving cause of paying Hallam's salary, and others like them who had made a career out of charity. There was also the money needed to research treatments for cancer, of course. He imagined a different leaflet freed from the bounds of taste, a picture of some scruffy grandchildren treading dirt into the carpet of a smart retirement home, with avaricious parents looming behind. Do they deserve it more than a decent charity? Cancer Action, make that call. But back to the real world. If the cover picture did its work, then Granny would grope for her spectacles and flip open the pamphlet to glance inside. The next step was to draw her in with some sugary copy on the facing inside page. How to start? Of course, something sensitive and reassuring. "Please accept our sincere apologies if this leaflet has been delivered at the time of sorrow or illness. It is only intended to provide information on the legacy program of Cancer Action, which is a registered charity. Cancer Action's work has been saving young lives for the last 30 years thanks to the dedication of our many staff and volunteers and up and down the country. We intend to continue with this work, concentrating on outreach program into leukemia, but it will take more than dedication." Dedication in this office? If anything shakes this organization out of its lethargy, thought Hallam, it's ambition. Still, what did the public know? He recalled Kate's advice on the legacy market, which mostly made up of over 60s. If in doubt, lay on the slush with a trowel. Poorly children need and receive our love, and you can give them something more, a future, Cancer Action. What better way of putting something back? Hallam flexed his fingers and began to fill the document with some mildly mendacious history of the charity's achievements. For 48 minutes passed on Hallam's digital watch before Kate sloped over with a cappuccino from across the road and plunked it down next to him. She hardly ever bothered to go to the coffee shop. It was a peace offering. "Thanks," said Hallam, letting a note of surprise enter his voice. "That's okay," muttered Kate. She stepped back, then rocked on her heels and looked at her feet. "Look, I just want to say I'm sorry about that episode on Thursday. I put you in a difficult position. and also for being grumpy just now. I'm a bit ashamed." "What's there to be ashamed of?" asked Hallam, preparing to be tortured by the answer. The chances were that Alistair had gone home with her after the pub. He now regretted his decision to follow them, not to follow them back and observe them. At the time he thought it would spare him pain, but his imagination had risen to the challenge. Photographic equipment, a liter of tequila, and a 4-speed power hoist had featured prominently. Hallam now admitted to himself that he was beginning to suffer the symptoms of obsession. Or was it love? No, love meant helplessness and exposure. Obsession was better, more controllable. But how was he going to control it? Observation of his subjects usually calmed him by taking him out of himself. Now, with relation to Kate, it was having the opposite effect. He could see the rules were coming down, along with all their protections, and it scared him. "I don't think you want to know the answer to that," she said ruefully. "But the good thing is to take from this is that I am now certain for sure that it's never going to happen again. No way. If that's what you want, then congratulations," said Hallam, attempting to pitch his tone of voice so that it came out concerned rather than bitter. The result, however, was strangely unctuous. Hallam blushed. "Anyway, I want to make it up to you in some way," said Kate cheerfully. "Really, that isn't necessary." "Yes, it is. I've criminally underspent on expenses this month. I want to take you out for supper, just you and me this time. A few crafty drinks, no dodgy axes. What do you say?" Hesitated Hallam, glancing up at her. "I'm not sure, really." He scratched the back of his head thoughtfully, playing it out, then winced as his fingernail caught the bruise from night before. She laughed. "Come on, it'll be fun. I need to go through some work schedules with you anyway." Still, he hesitated. She suddenly looked genuinely worried. Was I really that bad? I must have looked pathetic. At that moment, Helen's mobile telephone rang. They were despicable contraptions in his view, but it was office issue, and he was obliged on pain of death to carry it with him, particularly on collecting missions, in payment of the suffering she had visited on him. He answered it before replying to her. "Hello, Hallam Folk here." "Hallam," said a female voice, its tone slightly foreign, as if uneasy with the pronunciation, or nervous perhaps, speaking. A pause, and intake of breath. "Hallam, hi, it's your long-lost sister, Lucy. Don't you recognize me?" The forcibly cheerful tone met with silence. "Are you there? Are you in the middle of something? Shall I call back later?" "Yes. No." Hallam turned off the mobile and to look back at Kate. "Sorry? I think you're about to accept a kind of invitation to dinner from your boss, who is currently paranoid that she made a fool of herself." He blinked, remembering the plot. "Of course you didn't. Supper would be great, as long as I get to choose the venue." "It's a deal," she said, smiling with a quite flattering degree of relief and pleasure, and then went back to her desk. A few minutes later the mobile went again. He answered it reflexively. Lucy belonged to the past. She did not have access to his new life. "Hello, it's me again. How are you?" A pause. "I'm busy." "I've had a battle tracking you down. What can I do for you?" A nervous laugh down the line. "What can you do for me? I want to know how you're doing. It's been years. I'm back in the UK. I was hoping to meet up. How are you doing?" "Keep out." "What, Hallam? What's the matter?" Hallam put the phone down and felt his heart beating hard in his chest. He waited for her to call back. What would he say to her if she did? Everything he considered sounded drama queenish, and it might only encourage her. He would need to express indifference, a couple of cool insults, then shut down. He felt hysteria welling up inside. What had she been expecting? Whimpering gratitude for having got back in contact after 5 years' absence? He wiped his terminal, trying to calm himself down. He peeled the plastic top off his coffee and took a sip. Too much sugar. She didn't call back. After 15 minutes, he got up to go to the toilet, but then realized he didn't need to, so carried on outside into the street. He had to walk off his agitation. The Cuban restaurant was not far from the office, but distant enough for it to be an escape in a place where neither Kate nor Hallam were likely to run into anyone they knew. Both of them were aware that it was a suggestive setting, and it seemed to amuse Kate to see Hallam nervous and awkward. Her own confidence rose. She took him by the hand in her big sisterish way, and then procrastinated over what table they should take, led him firmly to an alcove. "This was a great idea," she enthused, looking around her. "It only opened a week ago," said Hallam. "There's dancing downstairs." "Really?" She smiled at him, and he veered away from her bright eyes, fearing that she might have guessed his preposterous idea of salsaing to her affections. What had he been thinking? Suddenly his plan to bring her out of herself, to play it sophisticated and masterful, seemed horribly over-ambitious. His armpits were damp. He was already longing for the evening to end. Perversely, she appeared to be enjoying herself. The conspiratorial way she leant forward close enough for him to smell the white rum and cola on her breath was not entirely justified by the conversation about tatty office intrigue. He didn't take a word of it in. The first jug of Cuba Libre arrived, and then on Hallam was committed to the loathsome parlor game of flirtation. He began drinking to dampen his self-consciousness, otherwise he would not be able to function. Her playfulness tormented him. His replies in kind filled him with self-disgust. The charade made him want to cry, and all he could do was smile and summon another jest. He became reckless, half wanting to put her off, half wanting something else. But what? It was too much in the end. Hallam divided into two. The real Hallam rose out of his prattling exterior and began to observe another conversation in another alcove. It was between a skittish young man and a woman somewhat older who was taking a languid, slightly playful interest in her companion. He recorded the pertinent moments with pity and amusement. Clearly it was all going horribly right. 10:46. So what shut-up lines work for you? He asks. Someone once told me that I was so beautiful he wanted to suck the last man who left me. The young man looks horrified. That worked? She shrugs. It shows commitment. It's respectful. Have you got anything better? He thinks. Not at the moment. 10:53. Do you have a girlfriend? She asks. She's dead. Would you like to meet her? She smiles. I like creepy guys. 11:23. If it wasn't for your dress sense, I might have taken you for gay. He looks hurt. She apologizes. Don't be offended. I always insult people and I'm trying to compliment them. That's because you can't take compliments. You are gay. No, I'm not. Stop trying to be sensitive then. It was an observation. 11:43. She purses her lips and gives him a dry look. Go on then, try one out, a compliment. The young man frowns. I think I could learn from you. She pauses to think. That's not a compliment, that's worrying. She thinks some more, then leans forward. What you need is a good male role model. Alasdair? The young man asks with bitter sarcasm. The name abruptly brought Hallam back into his stubbornly uninebriated body. Kate grimaced. All that stuff you said about fidelity the other night. I was trying to be polite. I couldn't say what I meant. Why not? He didn't answer. He couldn't explain. What did you mean? She persisted. Cheating on you wouldn't be wrong. It would be weird. Kate began to cry drunkenly. Hallam tried to divide in two again, but found that he was unable to. Kate, I'm sorry. The waitress scooted by, and Hallam immediately sensed that she was moderating them. Another observer. He hated her for it. I said give me one compliment, not two. One. She wiped her nose with the napkin. Now give me a refill. She laughed and sniffed when she saw the look of concern on his face. He quickly covered up with a grin. You should consider a career in the church, she said. Look, for the last time, I'm not gay. You're a good listener, that's all I meant. He shrugged. This at least was true. He could listen, he could watch. Kate peered at Hallam with mock disgust. You just gulped that compliment down in one, like a frog. Hallam noted her eyes. My God, he thought, she's totally peed. I don't kiss frogs, she said. He started to feel scared. Those eyes were assessing him now with a boozy wariness that could easily be mistaken for erotic intent. It was as if a part of him had ceased to be invisible. He felt exposed. He thought of Verity. This scared him even more. How he hated Freud. But wasn't this what he wanted? Why did he have to want what he most feared? He knew what was coming. Why had he started this? Where were the rules when he needed them? Shall I get some coffee? Suggested Hallam, desperate to sober her up. No, she said with loud finality. Come back and have one. Bill, please. His shoulder muscles were aching from the tension. He was genuinely exhausted. The waitress approached with the tab, and he wished he could tell her how much he resented her feeding off their conversation, but she carefully avoided his accusatory eye. Kate burrowed in her bag for money. It's a bit late, attempted Hallam. I might head back, but Kate stood up, strangely fortified by her earlier display of vulnerability. So unlike a man. Hallam was required to take note of her body, her breasts. She gave him an incontrovertible stare. You're coming with me. Hallam was a dead man. Worse than dead. Condemned. He stood behind Kate as she cursed and drunkenly rattled the key in the flat door. Dizziness swept over him as the door swung open and he followed her in, one Hallam experiencing this nauseous technicolor, the other Hallam like a security camera looking down at these two fuzzy people, recording their movements in black and white, the crime in progress. 12:19. The young man wipes his clammy palms on his trousers as the woman, somewhat older, bustles around the kitchen, putting on the kettle tipsily to herself. Classic seductive behavior, but what is the young man up to? Is he as drunk as she is, leaning like that on the kitchen tabletop, rubbing the cheek of his sickly gray face? Is he about to throw up? Do you like it, Milky? She asks, holding up a carton of semi-skimmed. Hallam's two halves combined again. His visions temporarily went sepia yellow, and he wondered whether he was going to faint. How would he explain himself? He coughed a whimper, not something he had thought possible before. But he was inspired this evening by pure concerned terror. "Yes, please." She smiled and put down the milk carton on the side. With heavy deliberation, she looked at him up and down and cocked her head. She came up and pressed herself against him. Her fingers pulled his shirt tails out from the back of his trousers, and she ran her nails along his lower spine. She leaned forward and gently bit his lower lip. His eyelids fluttered and closed. He stayed on his feet as she pressed herself more firmly against him. He could feel her pelvic bone against his crotch. She began to move. A second pulse of nausea arose from his stomach into his throat. Her hand moved slyly round the back to his side, rested there for a moment, then pinched the skin hard enough for him to yelp. "Hallam, I'm afraid I don't find you very attractive." Her voice seemed hard-edged despite the slurring. "You're too young, far too skinny, and frankly rather odd." She stepped back, causing a short, high-pitched cough of released tension from Hallam. "However," she continued, "I do like to toy with my subordinates. I presume you've had the usual female boss fantasies." Hallam had difficulty articulating himself at first. "Well, yes, of course. But they've always been very differential." She seemed to be waiting for details. "I'm your willing slave, that sort of thing." "Good. Well, this is your lucky night. I'm feeling very empowered. Wait here for a bit, then follow me in and sit down." Dumbly, Hallam stood there as instructed, while she slipped off next door in her stockinged feet. He took a deep breath and ran a hand through his hair. He considered running for the door, but then the music came on. "Déjà que me quede en tu brazos, dame tu boca dolce de amor." It reassured him. It reminded him of when he was still invisible, watching Kate's sweet narcissistic dances in the mirror. The rhythm lulled his panic, and the thought of her body drew him into the sitting room. She was waiting for him, looking up at the ceiling, softly swaying, hands clasped in front of her. He sat down stiffly on the sofa and watched with a preposterous sense of formality as she began to dance more freely. She wasn't self-conscious at all. She wasn't even looking at him. It was blissful. She had her back to him and was swaying, almost as if he wasn't there. Hallam was transported. For the first time in his life, he was experiencing unambiguous sexual arousal in the mutually aware company of a woman. She tossed her hair to the side as rhythm picked up and looked down at her moving feet. She ran her hands down her hips and slowly reversed towards him. Hallam was beginning to imagine, but then with a smooth twist of her heels, she got him in her sights, and those terrible brown eyes began to explore his face. He twitched as she came towards him. Her eyes, he wanted them off him. She leaned down for the kiss, but he thrashed his head to the side, away from her. He could sense the warmth of her breast close to his face, her lower body moving left and right. He wanted her away from him. She went down on her knees to corral his face, to try and kiss him again. He willed himself not to scream and push her violently away. Instead, he shrunk from her, hiding his face, pretending to rub his eye. "Don't," he whispered. "Not yet. Dance, please, over there." He indicated the far side of the room and tried to give her a smile of encouragement. She paused, piqued, but the drink was coursing through her along with the rhythm, and she didn't seem to mind. She straightened up and slow boogied back across the room, watching him all the time. "Don't look at me. Turn." "But I want to see what you're thinking." He looked so frustrated that she shrugged, raised her chin, twirled around, and continued to dance with even less inhibition than before, looking out of the window at the midsummer night sky, still pale as the margins. "Estrechame en tu manos y hazme una caricia. No me dejes y abandate mi lado." Yes, that was better. He felt that he had found the shadows again, but what was she doing now? Her hands had gone up in front of her, and she was unbuttoning her shirt. He pushed himself up on the sofa, transfixed. She was touching her own breasts, taking off the belt of her trousers, tugging them down a few inches, turning round again. The shirt fell to the floor, but he hardly saw it. She was a blur now through the bars of his shaking fingers as she came for him again. "Don't touch me," he pleaded. I'm gay." They lay together on the large sofa, shoulder to shoulder. Her shirt was back on, one button refastened. "Explain the erection to me, then." "I was thinking of my career." She did not seem convinced. "Venereal disease, is that it?" He rolled his eyes. "No." She frowned. He continued, seeing the need. "And look, you are very attractive. But I am—" He paused and closed his eyes, praying for guidance. "I am politically very committed to the gay cause, and I would regard any dabbling in heterosexuality as you've got a boyfriend?" His refusal had sobered her up, but only enough to turn her into a physical rather than a sexual threat. Hallam took a deep breath. Something deep inside him would not allow him to claim that he had a boyfriend. No. No, for some reason I believe that. The rest, I'm afraid, is suspect. Hallam despaired and looked out of the window. Her voice dropped. I'm about to get very, very offended, Hallam, unless you give me a reason very soon, a convincing reason. Hallam gritted his teeth. He turned to her. I'm a virgin. She paused. She carefully did not laugh, then she frowned again. That's a bit arrogant, isn't it, at your age? Is it? Pretentious. No one's good enough for you, I suppose. It's not that unusual. Alasdair lost his when he was 11. Oh, perfect, thought Hallam. Still, she continued, you do have other things in common. What? Hallam began to shout, dragging himself up to look at her straight in the eye. We don't even share a gene pool. He's a simian. Although, he calmed himself, I don't know him very well, of course. On the outside, granted, you're different, plus he's quite a bit older. But you both got that introspective, observant side, only you've not seen it. And you've not seen the side I've seen, thought Hallam. He's arrogant, I know, she continued. The macho rig worker turned artistic genius. He gives me a hard time about my parents having money. The fact is, he's from a perfectly reasonable Aberdeen family himself. They'll probably be horrified to hear the way he goes on about how hard he had it. Don't you think it's odd the way people rewrite their past to suit what they become or what they think they want to be? This confused Hallam. He had rarely paused to consider matters of class. As a pervert, he was above such vulgar forms of definition. But he thought about that last sentence of hers, and it seemed to reverberate through him in unexpected directions. Its immediate effect was for him temporarily to lose his crippling self-awareness, as if this notional facility everybody had, not only for rewriting their past, as she said, but for reinventing themselves, had the power to liberate him from what the past had caused him to become, or at least to give him leave from it. Kate leaned over to pick up her cup of coffee from the floor, which caused her to brush against him. She sipped the cooling drink, then fell back against the cushions with a little sigh. Hallam, afire with all the shared intimacy, was struck by a thought as unexpected as it was unwelcome. Was it possible that he, Hallam, had molded the past to suit himself? That he had fictionalized it somehow for his own ends? It was true that sometimes he wondered about his memory, not its vagueness, but its unfeasible intensity. There were memory sites that he revisited with almost religious fervor every night. Center Point, the footsteps passing by his door, the wide driveway lights, the waters of the lake. Were they real anymore, or had they metamorphosized into fantasy? And what of his ardent hatred for Verity? Hallam wanted to expel the thought of that woman from his mind. He twisted round to face Kate. He leant forward and kissed her hard on the mouth. Her lips were still warm and wet from the coffee. He could tell she was slightly startled, unsure even, but after a moment her lips parted and she curved her back as his arm encircled her and drew her tight. But then she stopped him. She took his forelock in her fingers and slowly pulled his head back. I'm not sure I want the responsibility, she said. We don't have to penetrate. I just want to go to bed with you. She laughed. Was that very naive or very experienced? Please. He tried to keep the desperate longing out of his voice. I'd hate you to think I was arrogant. She paused. Hallam's thumb slid across her breast. She breathed deeply and closed her eyes. Nothing serious? She asked. Deadly flippant. Right then. Upstairs. Hallam took off his clothes and lay back naked on her bed. He heard the taps running in the bathroom. He gazed up at the skylight and saw his body reflected there, suspended above him, the returned gaze oddly detached, the body pale against the dark coverlet. The bathroom door opened and Kate slipped in a few seconds later. She turned out the light, and instantly Hallam's suspended body gave way to stars. He saw the steadily blinking lights of an aircraft as it passed overhead on the long descent. Eyes on the city below, then it was gone. Psst, said Kate. She lay down beside him. They both smiled shyly at each other, eyes shining in the dark. Then he rolled towards her, into her arms, and out of sight. 4:17 in the morning, and everything was possible. A good life, a shared life, a happy one even. Perhaps happiness was important after all. Kate lay still next to him, breathing steadily. He was so completely sanctioned to reach over and touch her if he so wished. The barriers had come down. Hallam lay there in the dark and exulted at the possibilities. The odds were long, but right now it felt as if they were all fixed irresistibly in his favor. The rules were no longer necessary. The piercing tone of the mobile phone reached up right the stairs, and Hallam, dozing pleasantly, was tempted to ignore it. Then he realized that it was getting closer, along with the clink of a tea tray. Kate entered her dressing gown and laid the tray down on the bottom of the bed. She handed him the mobile. Go on, it might be important. Reluctantly, he lifted himself up on one elbow and pressed the green button. Yeah, hello? Hallam, good morning. It took him half a second to realize who it was. That peculiar accent again. It's Lucy here. Sorry, did I wake you up? I was trying to catch you before work. Are you okay? Look, can't you just leave it? Kate was pouring tea and listening. This is absurd. I'm in England. I want to see you. And anyway, I've never been to Scotland, which is ridiculous, but not as ridiculous as us not having been in contact for 5 years. Come on. We've got so much to talk over. It's important. Like what? You've not been in contact with Julius or Verity, have you? It didn't sound like a question. No, have you? He instantly cursed himself for asking her a question and prolonging this conversation. I spoke to him yesterday to arrange a visit. It must be time we all got back together, a reunion. What do you think? Get back together? Hallam went pale and Kate gave him a short glance over her mug of tea. You must be effing joking. Now get lost. Please, we need to talk this over calmly. Will you be around this weekend? No, you can't come up. I'm not having it. Kate got up and went out of the room, Hallam raising an arm to her, wanting her to wait. He heard the bathroom door shut. Are you alone? Yes. Are you at home? None of your business. Okay, fine. I'm not checking up on you. I've got to go to work now. Don't call me on this number again, okay? I'm staying in London with my friend Sarah tonight, but I'll be on the move. I've left my mobile number and you're answering the... Hallam pressed the off button and chucked the mobile in the duvet. He breathed deeply, then heard the bathroom door open again. Kate came back in to pick up a fresh bottle of moisturizer, but she didn't meet his eye. Sorry about that. Hey, hold on. Where are you going? I'm getting ready for work. Shouldn't you be? What's the matter? Oh, nothing. That was my sister on the phone. She's completely nuts, phoning me out of the blue. You've not mentioned her before. Lucy, she's been away for years, South Africa, and now... Hallam, I'm not a complete idiot. You spun an impressive line of bullcrap last night, and congratulations, you do a seamless imitation of a virgin, right down to being a crap shag. Kate. This was a hideous mistake, but at least it's partly my fault. Let's forget it. Now go home, and I'll see you at the office. You've got it completely wrong. I can prove it to you. Don't bother. Look, even if she is your sister, it doesn't matter. Let's just forget this. I was smashed. I'm your boss. This is not good policy. And if you tell anyone about it, I'll kill you. Hallam was speechless. Kate disappeared again into the bathroom. She turned the lock. He lay there, suddenly unwelcome, in the bed. He got up and began to get dressed, cursing his sister under his breath. The thought of reconciliation repelled him. Hallam entered the office, glanced at Kate, and from her closed, hostile face, concluded that she was not bothering to maintain an appearance of cheerful professionalism. In a way it was a relief because he was not sure he could have handled it. He found that he could bear the injustice so long as there was hope. She's angry, he told himself. She cares, although he recognized that this was hardly grounds for optimism about a future relationship. He had surprised himself with the sudden shift in his aspirations. He had never even considered the possibility of relationship. This was why he now realized his life had been so simple. He sat down heavily at his desk and logged on, which simultaneously seemed to activate a profound depression. He gazed about the office at the posters and photographs for various charities and international aid organizations clogging the walls, rows of images of human suffering and need. For the first time he was forcibly struck by the personal and moral vacuum that his job had become for him. He walked into this office and worthwhile existence was suspended. This was giving business after all. An industry called charity. He reflected upon the ingenious ways in which life could turn you into what you hated most. This job had once suited him. Its rules had seemed familiar and easy to master. He had instinctively understood the way manipulation could be disguised as benign concern. Verity, he supposed, must have taught him that. He had even learned to relish the task with a requisite veneer of irony, of course. Now he merely disgusted himself. He took a brief look over the text of the new legacy document that had been sent back by Kate with suggestions for revisions, mostly sensible, he had to admit, and after an hour or so he emailed the corrected copy back through. It was good work, he knew, and now a source of profound personal shame. He looked over to Kate's desk. She was on the phone, crouched behind the terminal, hugging the receiver in a way that usually denoted an intimate personal call. He did not need to guess who was on the other end. Alistair. He caught a flash of a smile round the side of the terminal. It was not for him. She was falling straight back into Alistair's arms despite his best efforts, perhaps even because of his efforts, and because of Lucy, of course. Eventually, Kate came over to Hallam's desk with a look that made it clear that she was on purely professional mission. That was Alistair on the phone. He wants you to call him. He said it's about the gallery down south that you mentioned to him. Here's the number. She dropped a post-it note down on his desk. Thanks, he said. He expected her to walk straight off, but she waited as if she had something more to say. His hopes leapt. I've just been told that Miss Carter died yesterday. Hallam did not know how she expected him to react. He did not know how he expected himself to react. She went rather quickly, didn't she? I wonder about some of these heart failures with cancer. They're pretty generous with the painkillers at the end. It must be tempting to swallow a few too many. How did you get so effing cold-hearted? Kate was so shocked by his vehemence that she rose to the occasion. How did you know it was cold? You got nowhere near. He was furious that she thought his accusation was motivated by her spurning him, although of course it was partly. Someone died, he said, and remarkably promptly, too. Do you have this effect on a lot of people? He went a vivid red. What do you mean by that? His voice was almost a gargle. Kate looked disconcerted, then laughed nervously. I hope you didn't put anything in her tea because you've netted us £1,000,000. Her solicitors were on the phone this morning. That's most of the inheritance, £1,000,000. It registered, even though his newly acquired bitterness and dissolution. Congratulations, you'll probably get a call from one of the bosses in the London office. I told them it was mainly your work. I wouldn't be surprised if they offered you a job down there at some point soon. You should consider taking it. Hallam took a moment to process the implications of what she had said. He could feel her watching his response, and as the pain of rejection began to expand, he looked up and saw her eyes glisten with what looked like malicious pleasure. How typical of Kate, he thought, that such a blow should be delivered as a form of congratulation, but then Kate's air of mean triumph wavered, and immediately Hallam felt a rushing sense of regret and tenderness. She was meant for him, and the force of this conviction surprised him in himself, but he did not say anything. Kate turned and returned to her desk, then went off in the direction of the toilets. Hallam slumped back in his chair. This was all so unnecessary, he thought. If only he could show her that she had misunderstood everything. If he could keep Alasdair clear of her somehow, just for a while, then he could work on her, bring her round. The beginnings of a plan began to shape itself in his mind. Only then did he recall the substance of that other information Kate had given him. The Miss Carter had died. Hallam was still not sure what he felt about this. Guilt? He picked up the phone and resolved to rediscover his humanity when he had the time. But even as he began to dial, seeking escape from his conscience through activity, a part of him was trying to justify his indifference, justify his actions, and justify his job. What was more important, he asked himself, the living or the dead? But he had been answering that same question day in and day out for the last 9 years, and every time his answer had been the same. The dead, the dead, the dead. Lucy. Yes, is that Hallam? It sounded as if she were in a car. Can you hear that? It's my old motor, still going strong after all these years. Sarah's loaned it back to me. A brief silence. I want you to come up to Scotland. You do? She was obviously surprised. Really? There was a pleasure in her voice now, and it acted like a provocation. But it's not because I want to see you, Hallam shouted. It's because you've effed up my life again, and this time you're going to put it right. You've got a talent, Lucy, and it's for effing me up. What have I done? I want you to show yourself to someone and explain to them who you are and confirm that it was you who phoned up this morning and that you're not some girlfriend of mine. A gasp and then a squawk of suppressed laughter. Don't you dare laugh, you bee. Hallam realized that he had yelped and turned round to see if Kate had heard him. Fortunately, she was not back at her desk yet. When would suit you? Seriousness was reinstated in her voice. As soon as you can. Great. Is Saturday evening okay then? I've got a dinner party on the Friday, and I've got another long drive after that. I can't wait to see what you look like now. Any surprises I need to prepare for? Just because you're coming up, don't think this is going to be some happy reunion. I hate your guts. Give me a ring when you know the time you're coming. Hallam put down the phone. He scratched his head violently with both hands and rubbed his face, then dialed Alasdair's number, not allowing himself to pause. He got the answering machine. He cleared his throat and waited for the beep. Alasdair, it's Hallam here. I got your message, although I presume you weren't really calling about the gallery. I'll pay the bill for the breakage. And if there is anything more you want to discuss, then why don't we do it in person at my place, Saturday evening if you can make it.